Okay, in terms of Syria, let's talk about Syria. Right now, there is another round of strikes. Syrian strikes, site of chemical attack hit again. This is Saturday, April 8th, and this was updated at 12:22 p.m. It is now 1:10 p.m. New airstrikes targeted a town in Syria that was hit by a chemical attack earlier this week. Activists said less than a day after the U.S. bombarded a Syrian airbase to send a message to the Assad regime. This is off CNN, so I'm not taking this as any kind of great reporting other than to let you know that another attack actually did occur. It says the Syrian Air Force resumed flight operations at the base that the U.S. had struck Friday. Pentagon probes possible Russian involvement in chemical attack that prompted U.S. strike. Very disturbing that we are seeing this tie-in to try to be blaming not only Assad, but now Russia. You have to remember, as of April 5th, according to the UN chief disarmament inspector, he said that the use of chemical weapons has yet to be confirmed, and the evidence has not been independently verified. The claims that have come out so far around Assad's involvement and these chemical or alleged chemical weapons attack have come from Assad opposition, and definitely questionable sources with Dr. Islam, who was facing charges of kidnapping journalists in Syria, and only got off on a technicality that the person who was kidnapped and to testify against him, the lead witness of these chemical attacks, the person who was going to give testimony was put in a kidnapping situation again. They were kidnapped again. So let's see. U.S. Ambassador to UN Nikki Haley to UN says U.S. prepared to do more in Syria. And Russian President Vladimir Putin said U.S. strike was an act of aggression. So basically what we have seen over the past few days is the United States corporate media, which basically has turned into a state-run type of media, with the current attacks and the current situation in Syria, proclaiming yet again unproven, unsubstantiated allegations as absolute, irrefutable fact. We have seen a story that makes no logical sense with Assad being at really the pinnacle of his success with the international community. This happened on the eve of peace talks, 5 days before the Trump administration had said that they were going to let the Syrian people decide their own leadership. It would make absolutely no sense for there to be a chemical attack implemented by Assad at this point. Additionally, the thing that really just screams hypocrisy is that the last time in 2013 when the corporate media acted as propaganda parrots and the United States government and the Obama administration were claiming that they had the right to act militarily because of these chemical weapons strikes, well, what do you see? You see later on it comes out, according to the UN, that it wasn't Assad who had implemented these chemical attacks. And in fact, the Syrian rebels who look to have implemented these attacks seem to have been armed by allies of the United States, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, funneling these chemical weapons to the Syrian al-Qaeda rebels who implemented these attacks against the citizens, which were orchestrated to be able to frame Assad to claim the right for military action. So, of course, when you know that the United States has a history of trying to frame Assad with chemical attacks and the UN proved it was false last time, the thing that you're going to do is you're going to parrot them doing it again as actual fact when it's unsubstantiated allegations. Of course you are. Why not? Because the United States has only been wrong, I don't know, 95% of the time on every allegation that they have used to justify military intervention over the past 2 decades. Why would you? Why? They're right maybe 5% of the time. Why are you such a skeptic? Absolutely obscene. Additionally, so they're acting again, incredibly precarious, incredibly dangerous, and what we're seeing is the Democrats, who have been basically stating since Trump took office, what have they been telling us? What has the corporate media been telling us? What has the Democrats and across the spectrum been telling us? We have to be very wary because Trump is such a danger to the American people and the American citizenry. We have to oppose Trump at every turn because he poses such a dire threat. So when Trump takes the ultimate action that could seriously impede our security and could lead us, without exaggeration, could lead us into a direct war with Russia, which could escalate into a global conflict with other countries getting involved and taking sides. When Trump risks our national security to that level and threatens us to that level, what do we have? We have Democrats aligning to praise him and pledge allegiance to his actions. I would recommend that you read the article over on The Intercept by Glenn Greenwald. You have to take the Intercept with a pinch of salt because it is really mixed. Sometimes the reporting is fantastic. Sometimes the reporting is absolutely propaganda. But this one article from Glenn Greenwald, it really highlights the hypocrisy of Democrats and how now everyone is moving to elevate Donald Trump under these powers of war. And let me see here. Let's get okay, so Democrats, with very few exceptions, such as Representative Ted Lieu and Representative Tulsi Gabbard, have refrained from criticizing Trump's bombing campaign on the merits, as opposed to process issues. Indeed, Democratic Party leaders have explicitly praised Trump's bombing. They will have to continue to do so, even if Trump expands this war. That's what the Democratic Party has turned itself into. Indeed, it is what has been for a very long time. And if you go to the Twitter pages of any of the Democrats, it is gushing praise for Donald Trump. It is also talking about the United States as being an act for good, an act as we act for the good of the world, and it is really appalling to watch the tabloid media, the Democratic political establishment, all of them, seek to be condemning what we do. Syria's Assad has not been proved to use chemical weapons on his own people in 2013 or in this current attack. But do you know who has been proven to use chemical weapons in recent attacks? That would be the United States of America. So, it is absolutely obscene to watch the hypocrisy of all of these politicians and all of these pundits talk about the horror when they don't care in the least about the horror that the United States inflicts 1,000,000 times over, more than any other country. We lead the world in terrorism. We export terrorism on a daily basis. We are the ones doing this. And it really is, it's long past time that we just say this out loud, because this is the reality. We launch wars on fabricated evidence. We do not launch wars for humanitarian reasons. We do not launch wars to spread democracy. We launch wars for geopolitical control, theft of natural resources, and military industrial profiteering. That is a fact. And we know that we will fabricate evidence. But that hasn't stopped the Democrats from joining to praise Donald Trump. There's a great tweet that was sent out summarizing this by Max Blumenthal, who gave quotes of the Democrats effusively praising the actions of the Trump administration, even though, I would remind you, they are illegal. We do not have the right to be launching preemptive military strikes against other nations on unproven allegations. The only time that a president is supposed to have the authority to act unilaterally is in an emergency, when the country is under imminent threat. These type of attacks that you are seeing utilize the premise of the Bush Doctrine, which is if we think a country may pose us a threat someday in the future that even we can just make up out of our own minds, then we have the right to launch full-out war on them. So it did not become, there's never been any treaty to override the Geneva Convention and international laws to make that kind of action legal. This is just the way we have been acting ever since that criminal war crime in Iraq. So let's see if I can find the actual tweets. Oh, here they are. Anne-Marie Slaughter. Donald Trump has done the right thing on Syria. Finally! After years of useless hand-wringing in the face of hideous atrocities. Peter Dow. I'm a Dem and I oppose real Donald Trump's policies, but I will fully support appropriate retaliation against Assad's war crimes in Syria. Alleged war crimes, unproven allegation war crimes, unsubstantiated by the UN as even occurring war crimes. What else? We got more quotes here. Trump is right to make Syria pay a price for war crimes, and taking out airfields is the best approach. Absolutely obscene. Those are unproven, unsubstantiated allegations that the story makes no logical sense whatsoever. And the last time they made these same claims, it was proven to be outright false. And they just say war crimes, war crimes, war crimes. So who else is saying that Assad is a war criminal for an attack that has not even been proven to have been verified to have chemical weapons associated with it yet? Well, it would be Bernie Sanders. Syria's Bashar Assad's use of chemical weapons against the men, women, and children of his country makes him a war criminal. So Bernie Sanders yet again drumming up propaganda. So I want to show you a clip that kind of summarizes why this is so ridiculous. And we'll go through a couple clips. Yeah, it's just obscene. We're watching right now. It's Iraq weapons of mass destruction redux all over again. Come on. Ugh, come on. I need a tech person.
Ask who benefits. Clearly, it's not the Syrian regime or the Russians who are who benefits. Clearly, it's not the Syrian regime or the Russians who are benefiting, and I believe it's highly unlikely that either were behind what's happened. There are different possibilities. One is that all of it is fake news. The images, the videos, the information all come from opposition sources and not from any credible independent journalists. It's also possible that the pictures show the aftermath of a bombing attack which happened to hit a jihadi chemical weapons munition dump. We know for a fact that the jihadis were storing chemical weapons in schools in eastern Aleppo because these were seen later by Western journalists. This is one distinct possibility.
Nevertheless, those that take it at face value are raising once again the issue of intervening against the Assad regime.
Exactly. We never learn, do we? Iraq, chemical weapons, remember that one? We were stampeded. Aleppo, we were told that there was a Holocaust going on. Massacres didn't happen. Independent reporters went in afterwards and saw no evidence of massacres. What we did see were fighters being bussed out quietly. And we discovered subsequently that a lot of the footage was fake.
There are also those who say, okay, we are where we are now, but intervention, particularly in 2013, might have changed things.
Well, it's not profitable to discuss the what might have been. Personally, I think it was correct in 2013 not to intervene on the side of the jihadis. Maybe I'm wrong, but I suspect that most people, when they thought about it for a second, would ask themselves, well, what's going to replace Assad and the secular regime, which is protecting minorities, Christians, women's rights? I don't think the Islamists would have been a better bet, and that is even more the case today. Remember that Idlib, where this happened, is a rat's nest of the most extreme jihadis. Dogs returning to their own vomit. They made all these mistakes. Iraq, Libya, they never learn, and they would like to reproduce the same scenario in Syria. Fortunately, the Trump administration moved only last week, and this may be significant here, moved only last week to disown the Obama policy of trying to unseat the Syrian regime. Trump's people said, we're more interested in unseating ISIS. That's our priority. And you may think it's significant that this attack comes days after that. Now, if the jihadis wanted to complicate Trump's task of making America's policy more sensible, they wouldn't have gone about it any other way than trying to mount a piece of fake news like this.
All right. So that was, his name was, this is former British ambassador to Syria, Peter Ford. So I think people are saying, well, the people who are interviewing him, I don't know which news source that they're being interviewed over on the UK. The important thing is who is giving the testimony. And the testimony talking about this is the British ambassador, the former British ambassador to Syria, Peter Ford. And that is what we're looking at. And let's look at some, because, you know, we talk about a lot of things with chemical weapons. Now, one of the things that people have pointed out is that, you know, the area that has been targeted is under the control of the Al-Qaeda sponsored rebels in Syria. That is the area. And the footage, as you can see here, is that has been provided, is these individuals supposedly going into this horrible chemical attack. And if you're going into a chemical attack, you would not know what chemical is being used off the bat. You would just know that you would need to protect yourself. Sarin chemical gas can cause immediate paralysis, nausea, vomiting, and even death to those who are going in to expose and intervene. And as you can see here, there are no gloves. They are wearing, a couple people are wearing dust masks, and they are handling people with their bare hands. That would not be something that would happen with responders going in. This is this is the White Helmets. Now, the White Helmets are known to be a propaganda organization for the United States. They have received $23 million in funding, despite their denials and trying to state that they are an independent organization. There is footage that and it's pretty easy to access, of the White Helmets staging rescues and staging videos that actually have been found to be propaganda pieces. So, it's very, very discouraging that people are taking footage from an organization that has been known to fabricate propaganda as some kind of irrefutable fact. And in terms of chemical weapons, let's talk about what we do know about chemical weapons. Now, I want to bring your attention to an article that was originally posted on the most popular blog website, London's Daily Mail, back in 2013, which was quickly removed and scrubbed from their site. But Global Research had kept a copy of it. And it reported that the U.S.-backed plan to launch chemical weapons attack on Syria and blame it on Assad's regime. Leak emails from defense contractors refer to chemical weapons, saying the idea is approved by Washington. Obama issued warnings to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad last month that the use of chemical warfare was totally unacceptable. Leaked emails have allegedly proved that the White House gave green light to a chemical weapons attack in Syria that could be blamed on Assad's regime and in turn spurn international military action in the devastated country. A report released on Monday contains an email exchange between two of senior officials at British-based contractor Britam Deference when a scheme approved by the Washington is outlined, explaining that Qatar would fund rebel forces in Syria to use chemical weapons. Barack Obama made it clear to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad last month that the U.S. would not tolerate Syria using chemical weapons against its own people. Now, this story coincides with Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Seymour Hersch, who reported that the rebels in Syria, funded by Turkey and Saudi Arabia, were funneling chemical weapons. When it was tested, it was found not to be of the stockpiles that were destroyed in Syria. Remember, the United States came out 2 months ago and said that all of the chemical weapons in Syria had been destroyed. And the chemical weapons were found to be from these Turkey stores. And it was the Obama administration and through the Hillary Clinton State Department that ultimately gave approval for these chemical attacks used by rebels associated with Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State, which went on to be framed Assad. And then we have this article talking about leaked emails talking about this very plan. And I think another important thing for people to watch who may not know the full story of this and doubt the veracity of those of us who are telling you that this is Al-Qaeda rebels that the United States has employed who have basically been terrorizing the citizens of Syria. And the United States is basically standing with these people who are foreign rebels or extremists within their own country to basically be giving them the power to take control over regions in Syria, basically standing on the side of the terrorists, which is why you see a lot of memes coming out right now that the United States is Al-Qaeda's Air Force. Let's listen to Tulsi Gabbard talk about this, who has been demonized as a Trump Democrat because she tried to talk to the Trump administration to not do exactly what they are doing right now.
Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, Democrat of Hawaii, I guess you say. She serves on the Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Jake. Always good to see you.
So let me ask you a question. Do you agree with Donald Trump's vision of America first when it comes to foreign policy?
I'm glad to hear him talking about ending our country's interventionist regime change war policies. As you know, this is something that I've been talking about for years, that we need to stop the destruction that's been caused by our country, continuously getting involved in these counterproductive regime change wars that not only end up strengthening our enemy in groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, but they actually end up causing more suffering for the people in these countries where we are intervening, as in Syria now.
I know you feel that way about Syria and Libya and Iraq. Do you feel that way about Afghanistan?
Afghanistan is a little bit of a different situation,
Right, okay.
but yes, essentially.
You met with Donald Trump 2 weeks after he was elected. There was some speculation that he might offer you a cabinet position or some sort of position. Were you hoping to work in the Trump administration?
I love my job. The people of Hawaii chose to rehire me again in November, and I look forward to continuing to work for them. My goal in going there, in receiving the invitation to speak to President-elect Trump, was to speak specifically about the situation in Syria, the dangerous consequences of escalating the regime change war that the United States is fueling there, along with countries like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey, escalating that through a so-called no-fly zone or safe zone, and urging him to end our regime change war there, to stop funding, both directly and indirectly, groups that are working with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, and to stop funneling those dollars and weapons and other assistance through these other countries like Saudi Arabia, who are directly supporting these terrorist groups, who are supposed to be our enemy, who we're supposed to be fighting to defeat.
And tell me about the legislation. You have a bill that you introduced today that would address loopholes you say have allowed American taxpayer dollars to fund terror groups such as Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria. Are you really suggesting that the U.S. government is funding these terrorist groups?
I'm not only suggesting it. This is the reality that we're living in. And
not directly,
most
though.
Americans, you know, if you or I were to go and provide money, weapons, or support or whatever to a group like Al-Qaeda or ISIS, we would immediately be thrown in jail. However, the U.S. government has been providing money, weapons, intel assistance, and other types of support through the CIA directly to these groups that are working with and are affiliated with Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
So you're saying the CIA is giving money to groups in Syria, and those groups are working with al-Nusra and ISIS?
There have been numerous reports from the New York Times to the Wall Street Journal and other news outlets who have declared that these rebel groups have formed these battlefield alliances with Al-Qaeda, that essentially these Al-Qaeda groups are in charge of every single rebel group on the ground fighting in Syria to overthrow the Syrian government.
You know, the U.S. government says that they vet the groups that they give money to very, very closely, and that you're wrong. There are not alliances between groups that the American taxpayers fund and these other groups. Obviously, they all are fighting Assad.
I beg to differ. Evidence has shown time and time again that is not the case, that we are both directly and indirectly supporting these groups who are allied with, are partnered with Al-Qaeda and ISIS in working to overthrow the Syrian government of Assad. And we've also been providing that support through countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Qatar to do that.
Quickly before you go, I know...
So, did you hear what Tulsi just said? All of these rebel groups that we are funding, and directly and indirectly, are associated with Al-Qaeda, and these and they are leading the charge on the ground. So we are. This is so. And these are the people who are reporting. I don't think a lot of people understand that when they talk about Assad opposition, they say, oh, Assad opposition is giving the evidence. Well, the Assad opposition is these Al-Qaeda rebels that we are funding. And we have been shown and proven to be providing chemical weapons to frame Assad. So I think a lot of people may not realize when you say that this is Assad's opposition that is giving the evidence. It is Al-Qaeda's led terrorist cells, the rebels. The rebels are Al-Qaeda-led terrorist cells. That is what Tulsi Gabbard is telling you in that video. They are all, she just said, they are all led by Al-Qaeda leadership. And this originally, let's go back to some of the evidence that you can see. So this is all documented. This is not some like far-fetched claim that you can't easily verify, which makes what the corporate media is doing right now so incredibly loathsome. If you look, this is Petraeus Al-Qaeda fighters. Petraeus, use Al-Qaeda fighters to beat ISIS. Members of Al-Qaeda's branch in Syria have a surprising advocate in the quarters of American power, retired Army General and former CIA Director David Petraeus. This is where this stemmed from. The former commander of U.S. forces in Iraq and Afghanistan had been quietly urging U.S. officials to consider using so-called moderate members of Al-Qaeda's Nusra Front to fight ISIS. They're not moderates. They've been shown to chop off children's heads. They've been shown to use chemical attacks to frame Assad to get support so that they can take over more territory. They're not moderate rebels. They're friggin' terrorists that the United States is sponsoring. So there's that. And I want to go and move on to show you, who uses chemical weapons. Okay, who uses chemical weapons? Now, these Assad claims are unproven, highly questionable, unsubstantiated allegations. What is fact is the U.S. military uses skin-eating white phosphorus in Iraq again. Now, this is from Tel Assur, and this is back in September of 2016. So that we know that, again, that they were deploying the white phosphorus in Iraq. Now, it is legal to use this burning chemical under the guise of providing smoke screens. But given the fact that it is a toxic, lethal substance that burns the skin off human beings, its use is often decried by the international community. And if other countries were seen using it against us, we would say that they were committing war crimes. But we know for a fact that the United States' use of the malevolent substance was most notable in the 2004 battle for Fallujah, which caused grotesque birth defects among the civilian population. In Afghanistan, too, white phosphorus has been used by U.S. troops primarily in the country's restive east, where in 2009, NATO forces came under fire for burning an 8-year-old girl with munitions. And we also have, now this is according to, the propaganda paper itself who is confirming this, Saudi Arabia appears to be using U.S. supplied white phosphorus in its war in Yemen. Now I can give you a million other sources for this story besides the Washington Post, but I wanted to use the Washington Post because even the worst of their rags are confirming that this is what we do. Saudi Arabia appears to be using U.S. supplied white phosphorus in its war in Yemen. Okay? So we know we're giving them, and now this story is confirmed all over the web, and you just need to Google it. So what else do we see? Military official in Yemen says Riyadh used chemical weapons in Yemen. Military officials in Yemen say Saudi Arabia has carried out a chemical attack in eastern Yemen as Riyadh continues its military aggression against the impoverished Arab country. Yemen's army spokesperson Sharaf Luqman said on Tuesday that Saudi warplanes have bombarded areas in Marib province using chemical and biological agents. And if you go back, you can see the original story. Now, this is just from Zero Hedge, but this story you can see on the Huffington Post and Democracy Now! And Free Thought Project. If you don't like a particular source, go and look up another one. But this story is true. This is the original. Now, this is talking about how, what I've been referring to all along, that the United States provides chemical weapons to the rebels for the point of framing Assad. Now, this was confirmed by the UN that the 2013 attack was not ordered or originated by Assad, and it did not come from any stockpiles that the Syrian government had. So the Obama administration falsely blamed the government of Syria's Bashar al-Assad for the sarin gas attack that Obama was trying to use as an excuse to invade Syria. Hersch pointed to a report from British intelligence saying the sarin that was used didn't come from Assad's stockpiles. Hersch also said that a secret agreement in 2012, which I just showed you, that they had those, the reports came out, the leaked emails, that they had been planning to do this. We have the emails that were leaked and were reported, but then disappeared off the site. Hersch also said that a secret agreement in 2012 was reached between the Obama administration, leaders of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar to set up a sarin gas attack and blame it on Assad so the U.S. could invade and overthrow Assad. By the terms of the agreement, funding came from Turkey as well as Saudi Arabia and Qatar. The CIA, with the support of M16, was responsible for getting arms from Gaddafi's arsenal into Syria. Evidence leads directly to the White House, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, CIA Director John Brennan, Saudi Intelligence Chief Prince Bandar, and Saudi Arabia's Interior Ministry. And if that weren't enough, even the definitive analysis of the evidence that was performed by two leading United States analysts, the Lloyd Postal report concluded that the U.S. government's interpretation of the technical intelligence it gathered prior to and after the August 21st attack cannot possibly be correct. So, you look at all of this. You look at these stories. You look at the context of it, and then you look at our democratic. Party establishment lining up with Donald Trump. And it's pretty much universal. Tulsi stood against it. One other Democratic senator stood against it. And then Bernie Sanders is going along with the fabricated report of saying that Assad is a war criminal for the chemical attack that there's absolutely no evidence to prove that he was involved with. But he did say that the United States Congress should at least have been consulted before Trump launched a attack and said that we should be trying to find a way for peace with Syria. I would question if the sincerity of Senator Sanders' desire for that, if he's going to be sowing propaganda, giving credibility to a lie to justify it. Also voting for James Mattis, along with 97 other senators in the U.S. Senate, Democrats and Republicans alike, voting for a total war hawk on Russia, Iraq, and Syria. And in addition, Senator Sanders joining the course of the propagandists who are shilling the election interference lie of Russia and using that as evidence that Russia committed an act of war against us when they have been not able to provide one single piece of objective, tangible evidence to prove that story. Very dangerous hyperinflation of a non-existent threat, which is being used to demonize Russia. And then you are seeing in the current reporting, especially with John McCain leading the way, these now they're tying this into Russia. Now they're tying this unproven, unsubstantiated, unconfirmed chemical attack that makes no logical sense and goes against the entire history of what we actually know. And now it's saying that not only did Assad do it with no evidence, but now it looks like Russia might be involved. And this is just an escalation. It's a very dangerous escalation. The Democrats are full of shit when they say that, they want to oppose Trump. They oppose Trump by what? Voting for his cabinet members, having one of their representatives, Representative Hastings of Florida, introduce a resolution to fight a preemptive war in Iran based on the Bush Doctrine to stop them from getting a nuclear weapon, even though the authorities and investigators on the ground in Iran report that they are in no danger of developing a a nuclear weapon and do not have the capacity for it. But we need to launch a preemptive war on that. And basically have been shilling propaganda around Russia to demonize Donald Trump that actually really threatens our security. What the Democrats doing, they say they care about the security of the American people, yet they stand with propaganda that elevates Russia as a threat to be fought. And now that Trump is moving forward in a way that is viewed to be as against the Russia people, what are the Democrats doing? We stand with Donald Trump. They're absolutely appalling. All of them. Anybody who is shilling propaganda around Russia is dangerous to this country. I don't care if it's John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Dick Cheney, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, or Bernie Sanders. I don't care which one of them is doing it. They are all threatening us. This is absolutely irresponsible. They are all agents of the war machine. And one of the things that I have been so horrified about with all of this is that you see a demonization, because there have been people, the people who have been most forcefully coming out against this are not just progressives, but they are people who actually supported Donald Trump, because many people who voted for Donald Trump were not these extremist alt-right that the media has tried to tell you. A lot of people who voted for Donald Trump really thought that even though they may not have been in love with him, but they thought maybe, since he did say that he did not want to escalate these insane policies in the Middle East, that he stood and in the debates said to Hillary Clinton, I don't want to escalate war in Syria. And he's repeatedly taken that position for years, because now you see all the tweets of what his former position was being held up against him right now. Those are all over Twitter and social media. And so many people were like, well, we're not going to go to war in Syria. At least we won't go, and at least maybe we won't have World War III with Russia, with Donald Trump. Now, obviously, I'm not particularly surprised, but, all of these people who have been taken in by the Democratic fraud, I don't know why they feel so superior for anybody who was taken in by a Republican's fraud. I mean, everybody's being lied to, everybody's being propagandized to. And so they are all these news stories all over the news are trying to decry many people, the reasonable voices, as only coming from the alternative right, the white nationalist right, the fringe crazy right. The New York Times had an article. It was featured on the top of Yahoo. It was in Google. It's been all over Facebook. And, I'll just give you one example, but they all have the same flavor. Trump's far-right supporters turn on him over Syria strike. Prominent writers and bloggers on the far right attacked Mr. Trump. They accused him of turning against his voters by waging an attack that he had said for years would be a terrible idea. And then they point to only the people who have any connection with some kind of white nationalist background, and they hold them as who opposes the military action. And so it's very much a strategy to to frame anybody who opposes Donald Trump in these strikes and the Democratic establishment, which is all of them. All of them. I don't even think we need to use the word establishment after Democrats. They are all, I think, except maybe Tulsi Gabbard and one other. They're just Democrats that serve the establishment, all of them. And we're all supposed to be fringe freaks, just like Iraq war. If you don't stand with war, if you don't stand with lies, you are you are an unpatriotic traitor that stands with Assad. That's the accusation. If you don't stand with us, the lead terrorist and the lead murderers around the globe, and that's the reality. Who killed 1 million people in Iraq? Who led that? Who lied the world into that? We did. Who led the ousting of Libya's Gaddafi on lies and destabilize that entire region and turn that into a haven for extremist groups and putting arms over there that now are arming Boko Haram. Who did that? Who did that? Well, that would be the United States of America. Whose military spends more money on military spending, war, defense, and empire building than any other government around the globe? Who would that be? Well, that would be the United States of America. But and everybody else is evil. Everybody else is evil, and our killing, even when it is shown to be done on lies and manipulation, and goes back decades. And Eisenhower warned us about the military-industrial complex in 1961. We are still gonna pretend that we're good. And I see, and it's bad enough, the politicians are sold out, and the corporate media is now the state media. It's tabloid. But really, how many of the American people still talk about, some leader in the Middle East as being a bad guy without knowing anything about the region? How many people are to condemn without knowing anything? So it's just absolutely obscene. And I would like to thank anybody on the right, and I'm done with political labels because they're meaningless, but I'd like to thank anybody who is showing the courage of their convictions and decrying Donald Trump and the military-industrial state and the war machine for committing atrocities. Thank you. Thank you. And this is why I repeatedly say that we do not need to be, bickering along the partisan divide that they want to keep us under. Because as you can see, what does any label mean anymore? What do you see? You see the Democrats standing to align and give power to the worst of what Donald Trump is doing. The majority, the vast majority, 98% of the Democrats are standing firmly with Donald Trump and the war machine. So it is very clear that we need to organize outside of the entire structure of this system, and anybody who is a thinking, rational, compassionate human being who is tired of our country being controlled by military interest and the corporate state and want to regain some kind of constitutional government and decency and ethic, we need to unite and forget political labels. And we need to, really start talking not in the terms of party anymore, but in the terms of our own principle. Very discouraged to be watching a movement of progressives looking to have Senator Sanders be the leader of a people's movement, a man who is lying about Russian involvement in our elections, which one of the narratives has to shield the corruption and the fraud that was committed, the actual election fraud, to shield the theft of our election. And this is what he's saying. You're never going to get any kind of progressive policy or not progressive policy, but sane policy for the entire American people if we do not have the means to actually vote politicians in who will implement it. Sanders is spewing a narrative that shields that. And then, seeking to move behind politicians who act as agents of the war state, of the war machine. I'm sorry, but if that's the movement that you want to have and that's your starting level, that I don't want anything to do with that. I want a movement based on the truth and the reality of the situation we actually face. And war and warmongering against other nations, and it has got to be a deal breaker. It's got to be a deal breaker. This is obscene. It is obscene watching what they are doing right now. We have watched the entire media outside of some alternative media sources and our entire political system become one in opposition rather than representation to the people. That is not new. It is when you found a country on theft of other people's lands and build it on slavery and continually have inequality, you are not going to develop a nation of strong foundations and ethics. But it's time we stop and we rebuild our foundations and we tear down what is rotted and we move to act together. And I really want to align with anyone, I don't care what their previous political labels are, to do this. And I have found, my experience has been that my Trump viewers, and I know my Trump viewers are not emblematic of every person who voted for Donald Trump across the entire nation, but my experience has been that Trump voters actually have been more willing, more quickly to realize how they were duped and how they were being led into the same thing than what I witnessed with Obama supporters 8 years ago, who many people still are held in their sway. We all need to wake up from the dream. So anyways, let me see some of your comments and then I'm going to sign off. Okay. Goodbye, Mr. Big. I voted for Trump and I can't believe he fell for this bullshit that it was Assad using chemical weapons on our people. I thought he was better than that. Well, I mean, you have to look at who Donald Trump has put in his cabinet, my dear. I mean, everybody he has surrounded himself with is in line with the very policies that you are seeing now. And that's what I've told my Trump viewers. You know, people were saying, give him a chance, give him a chance. You don't, it was just like when Obama allowed Citigroup and Goldman Sachs to install his entire cabinet back in 2008. You didn't need to wait anymore. You had your answer right then and there. And that's what the Obama supporters said. Oh, you got to give him a chance. Just because he's installed an entire Wall Street cabinet doesn't mean he's playing chess, Debbie. Don't you know he's playing chess? Super secret 3-dimensional chess that your little tiny cocoa pebble brain can't understand the brilliance of the Obama. You can't understand what he's doing. He's getting them. And I'm like, no, he's betraying us and handing over the power positions to the Wall Street donors who gave him the presidency. Burn her as a witch. Burn her as a witch for saying anything about the almighty Obama. Burn her as a witch. And you know, I was thrown off a lot of progressive blogs. I was an outcast. And so when I saw it with Trump, you see it immediately. Who did he appoint? Republican swamp monsters, billionaires, the worst of Republican establishment and the worst warmongers a-going. You wait for what? Okay, we waited, and now he's moving forward to not only engage Syria but tempt possibly World War III. So okay, you have your answer. So Trump supporters and progressives and libertarians and Greens and all the people of sense who may have a different idea of exactly how we go about creating solution need to align. We need to align as one community and get over any bitterness we have about our past political differences, because those are luxuries. We're in crisis right now. You know, arguing over specifics on how you want to implement certain policies is fantasy stuff in the face of a government completely usurped by the corporate state and the military industrial complex. We don't even have a government to really argue over anyways, or the power has been taken. So the battle right now isn't over policy, which I've been telling everybody who's been talking about K through 16 education or single payer healthcare. You don't get it. We don't have a government to implement any policies. Our government is gone. You're talking about policies. I'm talking about the entire thing being usurped, and we have to have a movement to address the corruption and fraud, address the people who have usurped the power behind the scenes through the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and deal with this problem as a whole. That's the battle. It's not about whether we get one policy passed or another. No policies are going to be passed. The election system has been usurped. The media has been bought. They are moving to advance to make protest illegal and criminal. They are moving to advance war on a scale that we have not yet seen, probably on a level since World War II, in terms of moving this into a global conflict. It's all changed, and people are still like, let's vote him out in 2018. Are we on the same planet? Are we on the same planet? I don't think we're living on the same planet. All right. Anyways, yeah. So thank you. Big thank you to all of the people on the right, or the left, or the middle, or the up, down, slantways, sideways, or round and round. Anybody who is speaking truth and standing up against this right now. Thank you for being on the right side of history. We should never be having our political discussions around a politician or around a party. All of our dialogue around everything that happens should always be on the merits of the actual policy and facts and evidence of what is. Never, ever, ever get lost in that trap, and you will always hold your own integrity. As always, this is Debbie, this sane progressive. You guys stay sane and peace out. And finish.